Well, the reason why I'm so, first of all, I try to be careful in my wording of these labels because I'm neither of them. So if I was a gay man, for instance, then I would be a little bit more loosely because I know I have contact with these people, with these communities, but I am neither of them. So that puts an extra responsibility on me to actually be correct in the way that I'm addressing them because I need to be respectful of that. And not just respectful, I need to be scientific because I have a platform, and there's a reason why me, a heterosexual, normative, cisgender, blah blah blah, man, is being able to lead these communities because I'm not as scary to people in positions of power. Because mostly white heteronormative males of older places feel like they can come to me and say like, okay, I will give you tools to work, but I'll still, I'll drop that little homophobic joke here because I know I can do it with you. So, and that happens. And the reason why I'm still being able to work is not because I condone or laugh at that joke, but I don't chop their heads off when I hear it because I'm more interested in the shit that they have to give me rather than the things that they have to say. It's not right, it's practical. And you're touching on another thing. That's the whole reason why in Portuguese parliament right now, the majority of parties in government are left-leaning, but the ones that are in charge are right-leaning. Because the left, per se, and I'm generalizing, but the people who are more, occupied or preoccupied with these issues will kill themselves over a fucking coma. So, and even as an activist, I can tell you, I'm more afraid of the left rather than the right because I know what the right will do. The right will, knock my teeth out. Well, good luck. Skateboarding does that. My dentist is amazing with me, so I don't care if a Nazi knocks my teeth out. I care if somebody says, "Okay, you're not a gay person. Why are you talking about gay people?" And that one time you said something, and then you get shut down and you lose a platform. And you don't do work that will benefit those communities. So I get that. At the same time, I think that people who understand that, those denominations, first of all, the denominations are needed because we cannot every day hang around with everyone in the world at the same time, literally. So obviously not every African descendant is going to be the same as every African descendant in the world. So everybody, identity is layered. So we need that. I'm not saying it's good, but we need that in the same way that a doctor needs to call the diseases by their names. We need to say that something is racism in order to be able to treat it. Because if we say, no, racism doesn't exist, it's just human beings being human beings because human beings discriminate and hate, then we're not going to go anywhere. We're actually becoming part of the problem. I hate that argument that people say, and I heard some black people saying that it's like racism doesn't exist because we're all the same race. I was like, yeah, but you cannot dismantle something that you don't know the name of. And so the same thing as reverse racism. I hate that. I hate when people saying, "Oh, black people are more racist than." No, black people cannot be racist because black people are historically the victims of a system that was created by white people. So even that one is harder, and we would need a whole conversation. But the whole thing is like reverse racism doesn't exist even if you have a crowd of black people or brown people or Asian people telling you that you are shit because you're white, because you created that economic, political, social, cultural system. You cannot be a victim of that. So at most it's poetic justice, but it's not reverse racism. So in that sense, what we're trying, how we achieve that you're saying is by once again creating spaces where we highlight our shared humanity, in the sense that it's like, I used to make jokes about Muslims terrorism 15 years ago. Then I dated a Muslim for 5 years. Now I'm like hypersensitive because this is something that likes, and I'm not afraid of saying that I'm that basic. I'm that basic emotionally, and I'm that basic intellectually, because it's like, okay, it's easier to joke about, or it's easier to ostracize somebody that you don't see their face as somebody that you have a direct relationship with. We're as humans, we're that basic. So it's like, once I heard Muslims and I knew no Muslim, it was easy because it was an amorphous concept. It was a word that was murky. It had to do with what we saw in the news. It had to do with what we saw on the internet. No, once I fell in love with a Muslim, there was like, it's no longer about shitting on Muslims. It's about shitting on the person I love. And it's transversal to that. So once again, if we have empathy, that same empathy that tells me, don't laugh at that kid who started skating today because you're hurting in about 15 minutes the same. It's the same thing that says that. It's like every time somebody shits on a Gypsy Romani person in Portugal, I think of one of the closest thing that I have to a son, which is a kid called Horacio, which was the first person from that community that I started interacting on a daily basis. So it's like, if you say all gypsies are this or that, I don't see the amorphous concept of a gypsy person. I see Horacio. And I love that kid to death. And if somebody fucks with that kid, then they're going to have to go through me. And this is the part of the being basic humans, being basic animals, that once we actually go through the threshold of empathizing with people and then acting on that empathy, because that same joke that might be true, might be not, about some other gypsy that is not Horacio, might be there, it's still going to affect him. Because if we generalize aggressions against one, we generalize aggressions against other, because not everybody knows Horacio. So if I'm here normalizing violence against gypsies, eventually we'll go to a cycle of ending there. That's why dog whistle politics are really dangerous. Because even the fucking acephalous people that we have in government right now, okay, they're not saying let's kill all minorities. They would go to jail. They're smarter than that. Most of them are lawyers. But the way that it's implicit, if you can understand how a racial minority can be killed in Portugal or in the US, and trace it back to that political movement and trace it back to that person without that person saying, let's kill all racial minorities. But you can still understand that it's their fault. And it's the same thing, because you're not seeing a face of someone. You're speaking of a concept. I'm saying immigration is bad. Yeah, but some guy who's saying like, okay, immigration, this is a good example because it happens in my city. It's like, immigration is the reason why the public health system is collapsing. Because, if you go to the hospital, look who's in front of you. You're going to have Indians, and you're going to have Gypsy Romanis, and you're going to have black people. In the mind of somebody who is not as eloquent as the elite, the intellectual elite, or who's not as empathetic, that person is going to think, okay, if I kill all of these people, I'll go first. I won't have to wait to see a doctor if all of them are dead or deported. But at the same time, in Parliament, they're saying, oh, we need stricter laws, blah, 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 blah. So this is the important thing about that. And that's how you go above fighting this type of politics, but also fighting the stupidity that you see activists fighting with activists. Because it all comes down to ego as well. I know a shit ton of people who go to marches, who are there, and they have their photos taken for their social media, and fucked if I see them every day on the streets, or are vandalizing posters, political posters on the streets, but where are they when the Nazis come? Because this happened as well. There was a 4,000 to 5,000 Nazi march in a place called Albufeira in the Algarve. And I know people who make it their whole identity to, spray Palestinian flags all over the place and vandalize neo-fascist politicians' posters. But once it came to the point of being there and looking them in the eye, they were nowhere to be seen. So yeah, those people are part of the problem. They're not part of the solution, regardless of how much I love seeing, the vandalized posters in the street art. But those people are part of the problem.